Hello and welcome to Myth Monsters. My name is Erin and I'll be your host for these little snack bite-sized podcasts on folklore and mythical monsters from around the world. These podcasts focus on the actual cryptids, folklore and mythic monsters from global mythology, rather than focusing on the full stories of heroes and their big adventures. I'll also be dropping in some references that they have to recent culture and where you can see these represented in modern day content so that you can learn more and get as obsessed as I am about these absolute legends of the mythological world. We're in with another episode this week to make up for the neglect of last week. I hope you all forgive me. But I've been terribly busy and all over the place. I'm prepping for my holiday next week, and for the next 2 episodes they will be published whilst I'm away automatically. So don't worry your pretty little heads about them, you will still get your episodes. Speaking of pretty heads, this monster certainly does not have one. This week we're heading over to a mythology I didn't even know existed, and I'm a folklorist. But in theory we're staying in Britain, but we're also going over the channel to France for an Arthurian legendary monster, the questing beast. The questing beast is described as a hybrid animal in general, and there are 2 main descriptions of it. The most popular is that it is an enormous monster, at least the size of a house, and is made up of bits of different animals, with the body of a leopard, head and neck of a snake, legs and tail of a lion, and the feet of a hart, which is typically a type of deer. It barks incessantly like a dog, but with the sound of at least 12 of them, which is incredibly loud. This monster is, by all accounts, pretty peaceful. There are no reports of it actually attempting to hurt anyone, and generally it tries to stay away from humans, albeit its loud barking and ferocious creature makeup. It runs away from any threat, and is incredibly difficult to catch by usual human means, and spends most of its life on the run. We also believe that this monster has some kind of enhanced durability, speed and strength due to the animals it's made up of, and the general size of the thing. Unfortunately, we can't tell if this monster was based in the English or French countryside, but we do know that it preferred woodland and glades due to the extensive tree cover and kind of camouflage. The other description of the questing beast was that it was a fluffy, white and small creature, with the head and neck of a sheep, the body of a fox, legs of a dog, and tail of a lion. This one is even less ferocious, but both of these monsters have the same problem, the barking. This barking is caused by a literal litter of their offspring, which are causing such a ruckus whilst being unborn from their mother's womb because they want to be born. And realistically, the questing beast has just been in labour this whole time. Unfortunately, questing beast babies have one MO when they are born: to kill their mother either in childbirth or by consuming her live body. We're not sure how the questing beast got to be pregnant, as there doesn't seem to be a reported male version of this monster. In fact, it seems that there was only one full-sized one ever talked about. We also don't know how to kill it, if you were ever to come across it, but the belief was that you could kill it using usual means of human weaponry. And because this is Arthurian legend, we're talking swords, shields and arrows. To finish off the list of things we don't know about this monster, we don't know what they ate either, but there is an assumption that they ate people, which was never backed up within the folklore, and logistically, I'm not entirely sure a giant snake could eat a person, but then again I think of anacondas, and probably yeah. There is something we do know though, the etymology. The questing beast is pretty literal, and knowing just the basic bit about King Arthur, you would know that he goes on lots of quests. That's kind of his thing. But I've tricked you, haha, it's not from that. It actually comes from the other name for this monster, which is in French, Beast glatissant, with glatissant coming from the root word glapissant, which means yelping or barking, relating to, of course, the horrible noise this monster makes. Now, because of the folklore this monster comes from, it makes the history easy and difficult all at the same time. Easy in the fact that we can whittle it down to a specific date and time, but difficult to go into and tricky to figure out what path to go down first, folklore and the stories, or history and the facts. But we'll look at the folklore side first, because if you don't know anything about Arthurian legend, this might just contextualise the monster a bit better. Arthurian legend is about the myth of King Arthur, the first alleged king of the Britons, not the British, by the way. He was born a prince, and after being raised in secret, he manages to prove himself by pulling a sword from the stone, marries a princess, and sets up the Round Table with a bunch of knights that he really likes, including the wizard Merlin, Galahad, Lancelot, and brave Sir Robin. That is a Monty Python joke, and there may be a few whittled in here. They have plenty of adventures together, including the quest for the Holy Grail, and that is where the questing beast comes in. In the legends, Arthur and his half-sister Mordred end up having a bit of a fling without knowing that they're related, and in turn, he has a horrific dream of how Mordred will bring about the end of the world. When he wakes, he sees the questing beast outside, drinking from a pool, and he doesn't really think much of it. Later, a local king, Pellinore, comes to seek assistance in finding the beast of many animals, as it's his family's quest to hunt the monster down and kill it. Once the king has gone, Merlin advises Arthur that the questing beast was born from the king's daughter, who lusted after her own brother. The princess, desperate for her brother's sexual attention, slept with the devil to get what she wanted, and in turn, the devil made her accuse the brother of raping her. The king ordered that the brother be torn apart by dogs as punishment, but before he died, he prophesied that his sister would give birth to an abomination that would make the sounds of a pack of dogs like the ones that tore him apart. During the hunt for the Holy Grail, which lasts a really long time by the way, they end up finding the questing beast, and the knights chase it into a lake where apparently the lake boils itself and the monster dies. However, in another interpretation of the story, the beast kills itself by having its offspring eat it alive, and in that other version where it's a cute little sheep creature, they tear the monster in half as it births them. As soon as they're born, the knights chase off the offspring and we never hear from the baby questing beasts ever again. And that is all there is on the questing beast. With the story over, I can weave in the historical context here. These stories are all from either Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, written in 1485, the Paul's Vulgate cycle, which was written anonymously in the 1200s, and Percival, The Story of the Grail by Chrétien de Troyes from the late 1100s. So we know that this is all within the Middle Ages, and this actually coincides with a literature movement called the Matter of Britain, which is a really interesting thing to think about in comparison to these stories. The Matter of Britain was all of the literary material around the legendary kings and heroes of British folklore, including all of the prose revolving around King Arthur, but as well as him, there are some others thrown in there, such as King Lear from Shakespeare's titular play. These stories were created to form myths for the country, as well as merging the British identity with the influence from our invaders, the Normans, the Romans and the Vikings, as well as our native people, the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons. You might be thinking too that I mentioned that this was French and British in terms of this monster, but I never really talked about why specifically. This is most likely because of the literature surrounding the Matter of Britain was actually written in France by French authors, but the story was that of an English king, so it sits between both countries, and that does work with the Norman influence on British culture too, because of course they came across from Brittany in 1066. It's interesting as the idea of British culture has come from a mixture of all of these influences, alongside generally being within Europe and as an island in its own right. So maybe this idea really did work and bring us together on that worldwide scale. But unfortunately, I do have to confirm that both King Arthur and King Lear were most likely made-up characters, which is really sad and disheartening to say as a Brit myself, but it's one that really sticks out in our folklore to others. So I'm very happy he's there as this legendary king who may partake in some great but also shady things. And of course, we have to think about the influence of Christianity on this story, which would have tied in the morals of Christian religion on British folklore, which is tricky to do in itself. The questing beast itself represents the sin of incest, violence and chaos, and is in itself an omen of the downfall of Arthur's kingdom that he saw in that dream after sleeping with Mordred. Some have also interpreted the beast as a figure of Christ, destroyed by the followers of the old laws, or that the children fleeing their dead mother after killing it are churchgoers who chat through service. What we think it actually represents in reality is maybe an extreme case of mistaken identity instead of a fairy tale, as most monsters that we cover are based on something that someone has seen and cannot explain. The description of the questing beast is the medieval description of a giraffe, with the long neck, the patterned body, long tail and hooved feet. And with Europeans not really seeing them often due to their natural habitat, this may have perpetuated into a mythical beast across the continent from reporters in Africa. In fact, we have evidence to back this up. The Arabic word for giraffe is zafra, and this word is used in the original French books I mentioned earlier as a descriptive word for the questing beast, alongside docile and graceful, like a giraffe is. Now, the best mythical comparison I can make to this one is the Chimera, a Greek hybrid monster made of three animals, the lion, goat and snake. Although this monster is considerably worse temper-wise and certainly in aggression, it is very similar in its looks, and really is the only thing I can compare to this that I can think of. There is a lasting argument of Arthurian legend, and that's why we still argue whether he existed or didn't. And he's the subject of many bits of modern media. For example, if you've seen Disney's Sword in the Stone, or even BBC's Merlin series, you'll know that he is a really big figure within modern media, especially here in Britain. Even to go as far as he has an actual grave somewhere in Surrey. The questing beast also left a mark in America, of all places, as, according to some, the animal and the knights made their way across the pond. Bear in mind, we had not discovered America yet, and it leapt from one of the knights' swords and left its print on the surface of Helicopter Rock in Nevada, where the mark can be seen to this day. Do I think that's true? Absolutely not. But there is a mark in the rock that you can go and see, I guess, if you want to look at a rock. Now, onto modern media. We don't have many things at all for the actual questing beast itself, but I filled this out with a lot of Arthurian legend and mix and match monster content for you. For art though, have a look at the classic art pieces such as Arthur and the Questing Beast by Henry Justice Ford from 1904, or there's The Questing Beast by Arthur Rackham from 1917. Otherwise, there's some really cool independent art around for this one, and a load of D&D bits drawn up for them too. In movies, we have Sword in the Stone, The Once and Future King, Knight Riders, Camelot, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Angry Red Planet, Godzilla, Lockjaw, Rise of the Kalev Serpent, Pirates of the Caribbean, Sharktopus, Star Wars, Spy Kids 2 Island of Lost Dreams, and Upside Down Magic. For TV, we have Merlin, Lost in Space, The Magicians, Encrypted, Doctor Who, Odd Squad, Power Rangers, Ultraman, Animal Land, Full Metal Alchemist, Berserk, One Piece, Naruto, Toriko, Beastars, Inuyasha, Digimon, Pokemon, Adventure Time, Eleanor of Avalor, Gravity Falls, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Family Guy, My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, The Simpsons, South Park, Unikitty, Spliced, and Phineas and Ferb. In video games, we have ones such as Pokemon, Monster Hunter, I Was a Teenage Exocolonist, Heroes of Might and Magic, God of War, Fallout, Final Fantasy, Magic the Gathering, Dragon Quest, Dark Souls, Chimera Beast, Kelowna, Master of the Monster Lair, Lorewolf, No Man's Sky, Super Mario Bros, Sly 3, Honor Amongst Thieves, Tales of the Abyss and Tales of Zillion, Uncle Albert's Adventures, Warcraft, Viva Pinata, Gauntlet, World of Warcraft, Starbound, Crash Bandicoot, Quest for Glory, and Sonic the Hedgehog. My book recommendation this week is for Arthurian Legends by Rosalind Kirvan, who has written so many fantastic mythology books, and I recommend her stuff all the time. And for more, have a look at Arthurian Myths and Legends, Tales of Heroes, Gods and Monsters by J.K. Jackson and Professor Raluca Radulesca for more Arthurian bits. But now it's time for Do I Think They Existed? There's a long answer to this, but I think the gist is no from me. This comes from, realistically, an invented folklore, let alone the characters within this story, as well as having a massive hybrid mishmash of a monster that we're looking at. I will admit that I didn't even think that Arthurian legends had their own subcategory of mythology. I thought they were imbued into British and French folklore, so I hope you've learnt something like I have in this episode, even if it's as simple as that. I personally never really understood the appeal behind King Arthur, although I do like the idea of a folklore king that was never proven to exist anywhere, but lives on as this cultural icon. But some people really do believe he was a real person. And that is the reason I like Sweeney Todd too, who is also a fictional character who did not really live on Fleet Street, I'm afraid to say. And actually, scrap the Arthurian legend thing. If there's anything you learn from this episode, it must be that Sweeney Todd isn't real. And I stand by that as my best fact in this episode. Maybe I'll cover him someday. But, back to the questing beast. The short answer is no, I'm afraid. Do I think there's a weird incest-created beast out there with countless animal parts making up its physical being? Nah, I don't think so. And if you're completely honest with me, do you think he exists too? Let me know what you think. Did the questing beast emerge from a bit of incest? Let me know on Twitter. I would love to know what you think about this one. A super interesting and educational episode from this monster, I think. I enjoyed covering this one, and I'm excited to see if there are any more Arthurian legends that we can cover. Although I'm not sure how many monsters live within those stories, but I guess we'll find out together. Next week, we are heading over to ancient Mesopotamia for another legendary bird. But this one is a little bit more godlike. Stay in your houses next Thursday for the incredible storm bird Anzu, who we've not quite decided is a god or not yet. For now, thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a rating on the service you are listening on. I've got the Twitter for any questions or suggestions on what monsters to cover next, and I'd really love to hear from you. The social media handles for TikTok, YouTube, Threads and Instagram are Myth Monsters Podcast, and the Twitter is Myth Monsters Pod. But all of our content can be found at mythmonsters.co.uk, including some very cool merchandise. And you can find us on Good Pods, Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon if you want to help me fund the podcast too. Come join the fun though, share this with your pals, they might love me as much as you do. But for now, stay spooky, and I'll see you later, babes.